Welcome to the Synergy podcasts, conversations that cut through the hype and actually get to what works. I'm Ulrike Eder, Chief Marketing Officer here at esynergy. And in each episode, we sit down with business and technology leaders to hear their unfiltered story, the lessons learned behind success and failure, and practical steps to turn big ideas into actual real-life impact. Today, I'm joined by Roland Butler, Head of Product Content Solutions at Zalando. And Roland has spent years building and scaling digital products at one of Europe's biggest online platforms. And we're going to dig into a lot of product leadership and what good looks like in that area. Roland, really great to have you. And I'm excited about this time we spent together.
Yeah, very cool to be here.
Let's dig into it. For people listening who haven't experienced it, can you tell us a little bit about Zalando?
Yeah, for sure. So if you're listening from the UK, then I usually have to do this explanation. So I'm very good at it. Zalando is the largest fashion e-commerce platform in Europe by a country mile. We have around a campus with 8 tower blocks on in Berlin and 60 million customers. And I joined 4 years ago after doing a lot of work in the UK with companies like Just Eat and Book a Table, where I guess I cut my teeth. And then I was super excited because I wanted to see what it looked like on the other side of scale, like post-scale. So I remember at Just Eat, it was around scaling from 30 engineers to 1,000. At Book a Table, it was more of a how do you turn around and G up a business that's gone a bit flat. But Zalando, it's like north of 10,000 people. It's the other side of scale. And it was really interesting to me to see how that worked from the inside.
So just to put a clean slate and have a shared understanding, I guess. And I always think product leadership, I compare it sometimes to marketing leadership because depending on who you ask, people have many opinions on it, and they're always vastly differing in terms of what the streams of responsibility are. Could you just share in your world what that looks like for you?
As I said, I think context is really key, and it varies where you are. But I think if you are a product leader, and your job is to understand how your products work, how they deliver best on the promise your business has made to the customer. That is like universal. It doesn't matter whether you're in fast food, fashion, used cars, finance, B2B, B2C, whatever. You have a customer and your business is making a promise. And the promise is delivered by the product. Like that's where it goes wrong. If sales are selling something and the product is not delivering on that promise, that's a fail. If marketing are telling a story and the product is not delivering on the expectation set, that's a fail. So I think that's you as a product leader. That's where you stand or fall. And I think to do that requires you to often work in many other dimensions. So, and you hear all these like classic complaints like sales are like, oh, sales aren't paying attention to product and they're not selling the thing that we're building. Like, if you're a product leader, that's not acceptable. You get in that conversation and you fix that conversation. If sales aren't selling what you're building, then you're either building the wrong thing or you're not telling sales about it in a way they understand. Same with marketing. So for me, if I go back to your question about core responsibilities, your responsibility is to deliver on the promise made by your business and work with everyone else to make sure that's aligned with what's being built.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that a little bit later, about that dynamic working across the business beyond the product team, because I think it's something a lot of leaders are struggling with in terms of how do I really build strong relationships with my marketing team, with my sales team, because only if that works, you as a product team can be successful as well.
That's a really good question, and it is a super challenging space. If you're transferring into one of these roles, I'm guessing you're thinking, well, I know how to do product management. I know a bit about technology. I will be the expert on this field in those leadership rounds. But actually, so my takeaway from that is, well, that's the wrong mindset. That's table stakes. Like you're not, if you weren't considered the expert, you wouldn't be there. Your job on those rounds is to actually drive the business. Like, I mean, if your team is failing or there's some kind of argument between product and tech, like that's not expected to happen. That's not what those forums are for. Those are things you need to sort out. And that's where you are, I think, way more dependent on your team and the people in your team than you can expect as you move into those roles, if that's where you're going with that question.
Yeah.
That's my watch out for anyone stepping into a leadership role. Trust your own people and then be prepared to get on board with a whole bunch of new topics. You'll be talking about finance, you'll be talking about sales. At some point you'll feel you're actually co-running the marketing team. These are all things that can happen, and they happen very fast. And I think when you get to those rounds, the other people at that table will be able to switch context incredibly fast. So you'll need to keep up.
Mm. So the demand on the leadership role is also to be able to step outside your reins and area
Yeah.
and really
So I
put.
think an analogy I use is gear changing. I've used this quite a lot when I coach people. You get very used in product to operating in one or two gears. You're either in the detail of the Jira tickets or you're, explaining a pitch for a product. But actually, I always remember this actually from Just Eat. It was super weird to see how the early days executive leadership team could change gears. You'd be in a meeting pitching to these, whatever the executive team, and they'd literally be larking around. You're like, well, what is this? This is not a serious business. I suppose we were supposed to be the biggest e-commerce platform for takeaway in Europe, but you're just cracking jokes. And then suddenly they would switch. And you'd be like, whoa, where did that come from? CFO asked this question, and you're like, crap, where did that number come from? And actually, while they've been joking, they know every single part about that business, and they want you to know it too. And what caught me out in those days was how fast you need to switch gears. And I've seen it. I see it again and again, especially in those C-level rounds. It's like chatty and it's bantery, and then it's like what's happening on row C36 in this spreadsheet, and you're like, wow, okay. And that catches people out. I see it on my team now, and it's like I say, it's a very useful analogy. Like, you need to be able to change gears. You can't always be in speech mode. You can't always be in detail mode. You probably need to traverse the gears inside of a 10-minute window. So, yeah.
You talked about kind of where things fall down sometimes for product, and I wanted to pick up on that in terms of product teams failing. And I'm not talking maybe catastrophically, but maybe they drift a little bit, they stall. Are there certain patterns you see that emerge as a cause?
Yeah, so I don't think there's anything radical in what I'm about to say, but it's complexity. That's the thing that gets you. And the thing that surprises people often is it's well-intentioned complexity. So there's a concept that I've used a few times that I find quite useful. It's called the reverse onion. So every time you're trying to do something, someone comes along with a really valuable point. We should get a UX researcher in here. Absolutely, you should. We should interview some customers. Absolutely. We need to get a kind of systems designer. We need to add an architect. They have an opinion about this. And it's all correct. Everyone is a professional. No one is trying to sabotage a product. They're trying to add their piece of value to it and make the product better for the customer. So there is no bad intentions here and no bad ideas. But if you step back for a minute, or if as you step back, what's happening is there's layers and layers of complexity being added, which is the reverse onion. You're crying more and more the bigger it gets rather than the other way around. And as a leader, when you see that happen on a team, you have to do something to mix it up. Now, I've been in situations where you're leading a bunch of incredibly competent people, and they're all A players. They know their game. But there's a point where the deadline is coming. You need to ship something. There's an investor meeting coming. It's running late. And you get in and you have a look at that backlog and you're like, holy crap, we need all of this, but we do not need it this week. We have to stop doing this. I think there was one classic example where there was like all these tickets about allowing our Turkish used car app to detect which language the user's phone was in so it could load in the language of the user. Sounds really good. It makes total sense. But you have to cut through that noise. It's a used car app in Turkey. They speak Turkish. We don't need this stuff. It's not for now. And there's loads of examples where you have to find this complexity and make a really hard decision to take out valuable, important work that people care about and park it. I saw once another story that really impressed me. I was working at the Fork with another product leader. We were in a meeting. I mean, COVID was happening. It was quite stressful. We were in a restaurant business and they were closing all the restaurants in the world. So it was quite a high stress moment. And we wanted to understand how this impacted our diners. And there was a 4-week research plan. to build a questionnaire and do this and that and the other. And the killer question in that meeting on a Tuesday was, that's really great. That's really interesting. But what if we had to do this by Friday? What would you keep and what would you get rid of? And I thought, wow, that is a good question. And actually, everyone, to their credit, on their team, we deleted a bunch of stuff, shortened the questions, pinged the guy who ran the database on Slack, got the emails, sent the email out, and we're interviewing people by Friday. I thought, yeah, that's speed, and that's really important.
So, and I think connecting it back to maybe when you talked about product leadership and what's required of you as a product leader, does it go back to just really always looking at prioritizing, being really clear about that, and helping everybody in the team, may they be, permanent team members or interim, as you say, we're bringing in people as and how we need them. It's just making sure we're really, really clear on what the priorities are.
It's probably a cliche, but it's clarity. That is what you are doing. But that's not repeating the same thing like you're banging your head against the wall. That's understanding what clarity is needed right now. If there's engineers in the room and you're trying to do a planning session, it's a different type of clarity from when you're trying to explain to an executive team why this, why that, why this trade-off. And again, it's a different type of clarity if you're at an all hands and you're explaining, we've just shipped this, and no sales, we haven't done that thing that you've been asking for these reasons. Yeah, and it's really hard to do. You will never be done with that job, and you can always be better. So,
do you feel like sometimes there is that tension between detail and high level strategy and strategic direction we're giving, and when is it too much in the detail? I feel like sometimes when it comes to product, we're so much in the weeds and in the detail, but when is it time to kind of extract and look at the bigger picture of, there is a deadline, what makes sense, what's really valuable, what do we push, what do we deprioritize? Is that a common thing?
It's a super common tension. There's a framework I use for handling that, which is seems to have stood me quite well. I think what you're doing as a product and engineering team is you're telling a story. And what I always ask my team to do is I need you to write the story. Like, go forward 6 months from now. I mean, this is the Amazon press release process, but you can spin it lots of different ways. Like, I want to know the story we are telling at the all hands. I want to know the charts we are showing to prove it. And we do that first. And then every time we are meeting about our planning, we are checking that story. Is by doing these tickets and not these ones, are we closer to telling that story or further away from it? And if we need that chart, should you really be pushing the tracking ticket again because you want to do the feature? That's how you manage it. And I think it is really, really useful, and it works. I mean, this is like an operational tip, and if you ask your question again, I'll give you another view on it. But that works super good operationally. It works in the planning meetings, it works in the sprint demos, and it means you're not scrambling at the end. You can see as a leader how that story is evolving. You can manage people's expectations around it, and it's super powerful. And I think on the clarity point, it also lets you be clear, because if you think about where you're telling that story, you've got one level of granularity for all hands. Hey, it's all working. These are the metrics. High five, everyone. You've got a different level of granularity for the executive team. It's all good, but here's some caveats you need to be aware of, some trade-offs we've made. And then another level of granularity for the engineering teams, which probably is on page 6.
Do you write that press release together as a team at the beginning or at the kickoff stage? Who owns that?
I think there's a subtlety there. So the press release process is a super well-known one, and we use it all the time in Zalando. I find it, I don't know, I'm not super happy with that. I prefer more of a tabloid story. I want to know what a punchy tabloid story would be about this product, because I think that gives you this flexibility about granularity. You've got a punchy tabloid version, you've got a long form broadsheet version, and then maybe there's a new scientist version for people who really like detail. So that's a small caveat. I know the press release process. It's the one we use. It has its values, but I think it also has its limitations. Then your specific question was, how do you write this? And I think this is something that I've stood by for a long time, is that story you're telling it needs to be collectively owned by the team. So the classic model is the product manager writes the press release. They share it with review, team write a TDD, a technical design document, or whatever, to deliver on the press release. But that feels a little bit segmented to me. I just think, okay, someone initiates a process, someone identifies a problem, but really you want the whole team to be in on that from the start. Like that's what will get you through the tough times. When it gets tough, if the press releases come from the product manager and the engineering and the TDD, they're only invested in the technical design. They're not invested in the outcome. So they will defend a technical design because that's what they do. That's their space. But I think if you start with everyone, then you are in a better position. And I've actually done a few workshops around this, and you go through like, oh, here's 4 columns, here's product, here's design, here's engineering. Where do you think you sit in this process? Where would you like to be? And yeah, it's much more blurry when you ask people. But I think there's a caveat there. That's not to say it's like total chaos designed by committee. If you look, there are people that have a primary responsibility for shaping the narrative and a primary responsibility for the engineering side of things and a primary responsibility for the usability. So if you look at one of these outcomes of these workshops, it's more product at the front and UX at the front and more engineering on the delivery side, but it isn't a hard cutoff. And I think when you have those hard cutoffs, I've never seen that work.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it connects to it does connect to my next kind of train of thought as well, which is you mentioned at the beginning one of the core responsibilities of product and the product leadership or product leader is to deliver on the promise of the business. And, from my perspective as esynergy, we build technology solutions for our clients, and we also need to deliver on the promise we made to them in terms of the value it's meant to bring. But what we've also found is that value is not just in building something on time, on budget, and to spec, but it's also making sure that all the different parties involved outside of technology, in our case, and outside of product, I guess, in your case, are bought in, are inputting, are educated on what we're building and knowing how to maybe sell and market your product. Is that is that something that you face a lot in terms of how do we interact with our teams, our stakeholder teams, and how responsible and reliable are we on them to actually deliver on that promise we make as a product function? And it's not fully in our control, but there's a lot of dotted line dependencies that we're facing.
Yeah, I recognize that problem. That is hard. I think there are many examples where product has delivered something that matched the promise, but some other part of the business wasn't fully bought into that, or maybe we didn't check with the senior stakeholders whether this was really that important. I love to catch up to sort of learn more from you about it. You handle that from a consultancy perspective, because I'm usually inside a company, and that goes back to, I think, 2 things: the storytelling at an executive level and the collective ownership. So we talked about collective ownership in the sort of product UX context, but I've noticed the most powerful thing is when you are making your quarterly planning and you're doing some with finance and you've got the accountants in the room and they see how it works. They see behind the curtain and they understand the complexity. And you've got this kind of esprit de corps. I think I noticed where you do that at the start, you kind of get that piece for free that you're describing, that missing piece. If you miss that at the start, you have to then build it. So that's you, if you're inside the business as a product leader, finding where the misalignment is. So if we build this for, say, a call center, are you actually going to use it? You have to go to the call center, you have to go and see, and you often have this revelation. You go, okay, so if I build this, those 8 people over there are happy, but the 150 people, it's not actually touching them. This is interesting. I didn't know this until I went there. And if you're there, you build relationships with the people that I'm using a call center because it's like a topic I know quite a lot about. You build relationships, you see the real picture, you build trust, and then you kind of cross that bridge. I think if you're coming from outside as a consultancy, I imagine you're relying on the people that have brought you in to build that bridge. but I can also imagine it's not always there. It's we're going to get these people in, they're going to fix it, don't worry. And then you're more in this wall situation. So I think I always, and I have consultants working in my teams right now, and my job is like, well, okay, ticking all the compliance boxes and making sure we've got all that stuff covered, but they're part of the team. And they will be talking to the stakeholders as an equal for the piece that we're here. We will do this together. It's a big piece, and it sounds a little bit esoteric, but I really think people are the most important thing, and doing it together and building that collective ownership is a really, really important piece that's often undervalued.
I agree. And I think, I guess from your perspective, there's different kind of stakeholder groups as well, right? You're looking at end customer and how do we actually deliver on the promise to our end customer, our consumers, and spending time with them as a product team. But then there's also internal functions, as you mentioned, the people that work for us in a call center. At the beginning, you talked about sales, you talked about marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about those dynamics? How do you influence? Is that proactively? Do you let things play out? Where does product sit in that chart?
I think it goes back to some of the things we talked about. It's in a product role with those kind of, in either a leadership role or if you're just a product manager. Like, it is being proactive. It's going on. So I guess the classic story I took from this, I think I remember there was a point in Just Eat where I went to visit the call center early on because I thought, okay, this is the problem here. Whatever. We're doubling in size every year. The call center has got 150 people in it. They can't fit more than 150 people on the floor. We have to do something. Otherwise, we need to rent another floor. And the feedback was, well, that's really cool. You're the only one from technology that's come to see the call center. I don't know whether that was true or not, whether that was some weird biased opinion, but I thought, okay, this is interesting. This is coming from the head of the call center. It's like 4 stops on the frickin' train from Farringdon. Why have we not done this? So I took that. I learned that, I think, early on in my career when I was at a publishing company, and I saw there was a consultant that would go every Friday to speak to the head of sales, kept getting his contract renewed. So that was a smart move. Never shipped the thing that he was supposed to ship, but kept getting the contract renewed. That's a little cynical story, but there's gold in there. For me, that was actually, you have to build personal relationships.
Yeah.
So I got on that train. I went to Boreham Wood. And then when I meet a product person who's floundering or they're trying to understand those relationships, I say, well, what are you doing? And they say, well, I wrote this beautiful email and I sent it to marketing, and now I'm in a meeting to review a project and it feels a bit adversarial and it's not going very well. And I go, so you sent an email, but they're over there 4 desks away. Why didn't you just talk to them? And like, well, I don't know. I mean, that sounds like a stupid story, but it's actually true. I've seen that a few times. Just go and talk to the people. Sit down next to them, find out what their perspective is, put yourself in their shoes, do that. And that's how you build those bridges. I mean, there's the small things, but then, and I don't know, I guess maybe your listeners are thinking, well, that sounds really easy. That's not going to move a project forward. But they open the doors. So you do that. Next thing you know, you're invited to the sales all hands and you're explaining how the thing works. You see the head of sales pitch beforehand. You think, holy crap, he's got quite a sort of bullish perspective on things. I'll adjust my gear because this is a different audience. This is not engineers. This is salespeople. And actually, because I did a ride along with that sales guy in the back, I know him. I know how his problems. I can reference him. You can talk to your audience and you can make the story relevant.
And because we're running out of time, and for me, this whole triangle of product, sales, marketing, I've personally experienced, you clearly have experience with, and I think you just shared a nugget of a tip of how to create a more harmonic, cohesive relationship between them. Do you have any other quick tips of do's, don'ts?
Yeah, I think so. The harmonic relationship and everyone starts together and building these are important, but there is some you have behind the scenes some hard work to do here. So that kind of lovey collective doesn't work if the objectives are not clear. And in those smaller meetings, that's where the hard work happens. Like, there are 4 things sales would like you to build, but you can only build 1. So you can't leave that conversation till later. You have to deal with that head on and close that one down. Otherwise, it will all fall apart. So I think that's one thing. If you see a difficult trade-off come in, flag it early, get on top of it, close it down. And I think The other hard topic is then managing that. So you do that once and you think, well, it's done. Then a month later, there's more random stuff coming on. There's something else. Someone wants to pitch this idea. Again, don't kick the can. Solve that there, because it will derail everything else.
Yes. Roland, I could sit in here and talk to you for a long time, but unfortunately we're running out of time. Last questions, which we finish every episode with, is if you had one piece of advice for future product leaders, what would it be?
I think I feel like I'm going to repeat things, but it's make sure you know what you're promising to your customer. Make sure you've spoken to your customer. That gives you authority, gravitas, everything like that. Know that, but also know the detail of how your products work. Those are really important things. And if you're a leader, if you've got those things down, you need to remember your new team is not a product team. It's the rest of the leadership team. And that's where you need to put 60% of your effort. And then your other 40% is going to spend on making sure the team that is, you are responsible is doing a cracking job. Because otherwise, your authority in that first team is going to be lost. So
Amazing.
there you go.
Thank you. Really enjoyed that conversation.
No worries.